absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's All-Star Wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once, if you would.
You want the stick?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Welcome in, everybody, to AWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of what we consider to be the best promotion history of the wrestling business, the American Wrestling Association. My name is Chris Tubbs. Along with me are my friends Polish Joe and Slick Mick. And guys, normally we do a lot of nonsense and a lot of goofiness. I think if it's okay with you, I kind of want to just bypass that, because I think today this is a show that I didn't think that we would be doing at this point in time, because we lost Hulk Hogan late last week on Thursday morning at the age of 71. And ever since then, there's been a myriad of emotions and information and thoughts, and everybody's got an opinion. And on the title of the podcast, I just put the complicated legacy. And some people say, well, complicated, that's just when you don't want to acknowledge the bad, you just want to acknowledge the good. I don't think you can tell the story of Hulk Hogan without looking at everything in its entirety. And I'm hoping that today we can kind of just give our thoughts on all parts of Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, and hopefully just do the show justice.
I think you hit it right on the head, Chris. But it's a complicated story of Hulk Hogan / Terry Bollea, and I think that's where your difference is. Hulk Hogan is one persona, and Terry Bollea outside the ring is another guy. And I think it may be Terry Bollea who's the more complicated of the two personalities. I don't know. Hogan had an image. Hulk Hogan was a packaged image. Terry Bollea was the real human being. It's kind of like if you're a fan of Mel Gibson, love his movies, but outside, it's not a very good person. And I think that's what you got with Hulk Hogan, although I didn't know him, so we're going on the basis of some of the things that he has said and done and hearsay. None of us knew him personally or well. So it's just opinion, and you can agree with us, you can disagree with us. But one thing I would absolutely say, boy, complicated, that's the operative word here.
The only thing I would have added to the title was the complicated legacy of Hulk Hogan / Terry Bollea. That would have covered what you just said, Mick, and I agree 100% with what you said. Hulk Hogan is one person. That is the make-believe character that helped transform professional wrestling. And Terry Bollea was the real human being. That's who he really was.
Okay, guys, we are now in if we're going to do it, let's just start out hot. We are in a time in society where we used to have a differentiation between the person and the character. And I really believe that we now choose our heroes not based on the character, but rather their their flaws and their characteristics and traits as a person. We'd rather cheer for people, the individuals that we agree with, rather than the character that they play. I feel like that's kind of where we're at, because there are people that say, well, I don't like this person's music because of their politics. Oh, I love this person's music because of their politics. And I think we're getting into a part where it is just so hard now for people to say this is a character and this is a person. We are now in a society where people cannot differentiate the two.
I don't think there's any question about that. And in the wrestling business, not to this extreme, but take a look at a guy like Chris Benoit. There are those who will just look completely past what happened with Chris Benoit, and this guy should be in the Hall of Fame, and that was never proven, and it's a conspiracy. And so, and wrestling fans are so insanely passionate, that a lot of times you can't get through to them. You can't explain to them, wait a minute, wait a second. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the kayfabe carries over to their real life. I think in Hogan's case, what I found over the past couple of days, I mean, I knew he was a polarizing figure. I didn't know how polarizing, because if you go on the internet, lucky us, especially with the internet wrestling community, my God, you either staunchly defend this guy and,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody makes mistakes, and, you're going to go to hell if you don't agree with Hulk Hogan, and then there's the flip side of it. This guy was a piece of shit,
why can't it be both? Why can't we look at Hulk Hogan and say Hulk Hogan, the character, and the individual was one person, and Terry Bollea might be questionable? Why can fans not do that?
But we used to be able to do that, and that time was before the internet, when your exposure to Hulk Hogan was the AWA All-Star Wrestling show, or WWF back in the 80s, WCW in the 90s. You didn't have the keyboard warriors typing their keyboard courage, and then you add in the unfortunate ingredient of a vast political divide. I don't know that we can ever get back to that world. I know we can't get back to that world where you could watch a character on TV, admire that role in whether it's a TV show, a wrestling show, a movie, and just appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the world has now thrown in its hat to help form the political opinions. If somebody does one thing wrong, somebody gets a DWI, and no, I'm not advocating for a DWI and going to drink and drive. Somebody gets a DWI, and oh my God, that's the end of the world. That their career is done. Oh, I'm not going to follow them on social media or watch their movies because they had a misstep. The reality is we are all human beings. And I used this line when we were setting this up. We're all human beings. Every one of us, from somebody tarring the road to being the Pope. Everybody on this planet has skeletons in their closet. The difference is some people have a larger closet. And for better or for worse, sometimes knowing too much is not a good thing. Too much information can
it can sully the waters.
Well, it'll muddy the waters, but people have lost the ability or maybe the willingness to provide or think objectively and just stop and think back. In Hulk Hogan's case, let me take that back. In any wrestler's case, walk a mile in their boots and then realize that, okay, what would you have done in that situation? It's always easy to criticize somebody. It's sort of easy to try to put yourself into their shoes, but the reality is it's not that easy, because you're not there in that situation for whatever the situation might be. You're not there to experience it. You'd like to think that you would take the high road or the moral high road. And most people, I think, would, at least most rational people. But the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. And even when it is, oftentimes it's artificial turf.
Yeah. Well, let's, we've got a bunch of things that we want to hit on. This one's going to go probably, over an hour. I'm not sure how long it's going to go. We don't want to make it too long, but we do want to make this, we want to make sure that we give you as an in-depth part of, or in-depth, thoughts on Hulk Hogan. So there are a bunch of things that we're going to talk about, guys. First of all, it wasn't AWA to WWF. It was WWF to AWA to WWF. So kind of give me the feeling of Hogan after he left WWF the first time and came back to the AWA, came to the AWA for the first time. What was the reaction? Was there, was it like, oh my God, here's the incredible Hulk Hogan? Like, what was it? What was it like when Hogan made his way into Minneapolis?
As I recall, his first run in the WWF, and again, you're going back to a time where you're relying on the wrestling magazines, and correspondence instead of your instant gratification on the almighty internet. Hogan had a reputation. He had established it in Memphis, the Memphis territory, first as Sterling Golden. There he is, and then of course onto WWF as a heel. There's no question about the fact that the AWA was the launching pin, or the linchpin, the launching pad for Hogan. He was a big guy. He was, a brute back in the day. And then, of course, there he is with classic Freddie Blassie early on in the WWF, big monster heel. And he had his recognition. He was certainly making a splash in the business. But until Rocky III, I think that was when everything turned around for Hulk Hogan. And whatever the negotiations were with the AWA at the time, boy, what a brilliant move to capitalize on his notoriety from Rocky III, bring him into the AWA. And, if you look at the old tapes, Joe, you and I have discussed this many times, and Chris, if you look at the old tapes of those initial AWA promos, he wasn't even delivering a promo. Johnny Valiant was in, cutting the promo for him. Hulk Hogan, couldn't put a sentence together. It rankles me that the AWA does not get the credit it deserves for really launching Hulk Hogan, the character, the superhero character. Without the AWA, would Hogan have been the guy that Vince wanted to get and bring to the WWF to launch his national, warfare? No, absolutely not. He would have gone with somebody else. Vern, Greg, Bobby Heenan, whoever it might have been, worked with Hulk Hogan and made him at least the beginnings of the superstar that he was. He took the ball and ran with it. There's no doubt about it. Once Hogan got steamrolling, The reaction to him, God, I was there shooting pictures at the Civic Center, and you just, my God, when that Rocky music would hit, his initial theme song, and he came into the building, and look at that. There's a strange bedfellows, I would say. Vern and Hulk Hogan.
By the way, why is Vern pulling Hogan's hair? That's why Hogan got bald.
I think Vern was he wanted Hogan to share the wealth.
Oh, I thought maybe Vern was trying to hold him back because of the money.
Oh, that could be too. But let's give the AWA credit. When Hogan came into the building back in the early 1980s, it was magic. Isn't even the word for it. I mean, this pop was electric.
When he came to the AWA, was he instantly the top babyface? Did Vern instantly put him in that spot, or like how did he get to be the number one babyface in the
fans?
AWA?
The fans made him the number one babyface. They turned him. The AWA's intent was to kind of follow the path of what the WWF was doing. Bring this guy as a big monster heel. Let's put Johnny Valiant with him. This kid can't talk. We'll put Johnny with him and get him over as a monster heel. I think the fact that he was in Rocky 3 blew that idea up.
Thunder Lips changed everything.
It absolutely did, because they could not get this guy over as a heel. Mm-hmm. The first couple of matches he had on All-Star Wrestling, Chris, they would put him in handicap matches. And he was this killer heel, going over 2 enhancement guys, crushing them, going right through them. But it wasn't that long. I mean, it was like night and day. All of a sudden, this guy is over like a son of a bitch. And the rest is history. They could not get him over as a heel here to save their soul. They did it in New York. Before he came here, they managed to get him over as a heel. Not here.
When Hulk Hogan first appeared in the AWA, he was freakish in size.
Yep.
Being, probably a legitimate maybe 6'5", 6'6", maybe. But not only just big like that, because you had tall wrestlers, but he was put together like a brick shithouse, obviously with little side help, but dedication to the gym and steroids provided him with a look that had, I won't say ever been seen, but very rarely seen. Once he was able to fit into the persona of the incredible Hulk Hogan, and the fans, I'll use a similar approach as I did with we've talked about with the Road Warriors. They came in as monster heels, but the reality is that the fans absolutely loved it because of their size and style and approach to the wrestling ring. And that's what happened to Hulk Hogan. And Mick, you're right. I mean, I remember those days. I was 16 years old in 1981, still going to the Civic Center. And this was before the Road Warriors. And so I know it's still referred to as the Road Warrior pop, but it was the Hulk Hogan, the incredible Hulk Hogan pop. I had never, ever heard an entrance pop like it did for Hulk Hogan when he not first, but once he started his climb, his ascent to the top of the professional wrestling world. Unmatched up to that point.
I want to, and I know this has been talked about time and time again here, guys, but I do want to bring this up because, again, we can't tell the story of Hulk Hogan without, where I'm going, without the Super Sunday not getting the title, the disqualification. Kind of take me through again, just for clarity for those that maybe have not heard it, the controversy around Hulk Hogan not getting the title, what the relationship with Vern Gagne was, and what was the primary source of maybe any sort of conflict.
first of all, the reason that it was such a controversial not giving the title was the fan reaction. If the fans wouldn't have cared and just blown it off as another AWA screw job angle, then I think it might have just dried up and blown away. You know, it's the AWA, it's what they do. But they had been setting up this match, this Super Sunday, this colossal match for a long time. And there was nobody that wasn't anticipating that Hulk Hogan wasn't going to get the championship. The table was absolutely set. And as much as we kind of poke fun at wrestling fans, and we do because they occasionally go off the rails, the fans were absolutely primed for this. And this was the time Vern could have pulled the trigger and at least given Hogan a temporary run with the championship. You know, they always say it's all in the chase, and that was kind of the AWA's philosophy. We don't got to put the title on this guy. Not only that, but Vern didn't like the fact that Hogan was not a wrestler per se. Hulk Hogan was a bodybuilder from Tampa, Florida. And, that went against the grain of everything that Vern had strived for all his life.
But I mean, Hogan at that point is money, though. Like, if you like money, it seemed like I don't care what you think about him as a wrestler. Right. If he's the guy that can elevate your promotion, why would you not give him the opportunity to make more money?
Here's what I think, Chris. I think Vern and this may make sense if you think about it. Hogan was already drawing money. He was already filling the building. There was already 19,000 people every month at the St. Paul Civic Center, let alone around the Horn. And this is without a championship. It's with the feuds with the Bockwinkel's and the Blackwells and the Pateras. So Vern's philosophy, as short-sighted as it may have been, might have been, why? Why do we have to give the title? This chase has been going great. Look at the building. Look how many people we have here. Look at the next door on the closed circuit TV. They went to the well once too often, I think, is what happened.
Go ahead. You're correct, Mick. One thing that I'd like to add. So if Vern would have put the strap on Hogan at Super Sunday, who's going to beat him? Who in the stable of AWA talent at that time would be able to even give a sense that they're going to be able to beat Hulk Hogan? You just had this long run against Nick Bockwinkel, and Nick by this point was near 50 years old. You had just done the run with him, so you really can't come back and do a run with him. You got Hansen and Duncombe there. Hansen was not in the AWA during the Super Sunday time. I think Big Bad Bobby Duncombe was.
Yeah.
But is a Duncombe versus Hogan angle going to give you as much drawing power as Hogan chasing Bockwinkel? I don't think so. I mean, Bobby was great, but I don't know that you could have had a 6-month chase of Duncombe and Hogan. It's tough to chase a babyface champion. It's tougher to chase a babyface champion than it is to chase a heel champion. Now, yeah, the WWF at the time did it, and they did it successfully, but they also had a much larger stable of talent to be able to do it with.
Where was Andre? Where was Andre during Hogan's AWA run?
Andre would come in for the Battle Royals.
Yeah.
And they were, they were teasing a Hogan Andre match here, which in the AWA would have been a battle of the baby faces at the time. But then Hogan and Andre, they teamed together in handicap matches where they would take on 2 guys, 4 guys. So Andre was not a regular here in the AWA. And to Joe's point about who would have challenged, there was nobody but Bockwinkel. Nick would have been the guy that would have been chasing the rematch, and eventually, probably with Bobby Heenan's interference, would have gotten the championship back. But all the other guys, Hulk had already beaten. You know, when you talk about we can't set up a feud with Bobby Duncan because it wouldn't mean anything, you already beat him. He already beat Ken Patera. He already beat Jesse Ventura. He had gone through everybody. The Blackwells, there was nobody but Nick. Nick was going to be the guy. And I would think that if they gave Hogan the strap back then, however long it would have been, Nick would have been the guy to take it back. Nick was Vern's guy anyway. But yeah, nobody would have been a believable attraction. I guess the only one that I could say, maybe in retrospect, Joe, towards the end of the run here would have been David Schultz. David Schultz might have been, had they not gone and taken the main event and went to WWF, but Dr. D or Saito, somebody like that might have been kind of a dark horse character.
Which is what they tried to do.
Yeah, but it didn't even last. I mean, they didn't have an opportunity to play that out to any great extent because they were gone.
Yeah, it started, if I'm remembering correctly, that whole angle started in August of '83.
Right.
That's when Saito on TV, drove the trophy into Hogan's chest, and then David Schultz got involved. Hogan's, that's when he started coming out waving the American flag on a stick, pre-Jim Duggan days, by the way. But that was short-lived because then shortly after that, Hogan goes to Japan and the rest is history. That angle then just carried over to the WWF. But would Schultz have been, well, I'll put it this way. Rather than asking the question, I remember back at that time and the Hogan Schultz Saito whole angle didn't have the same zest that the Bockwinkel and Hogan run did. And I'll say it again. Nick was, if he wasn't already 50, he was approaching 50 years old. Nick did end up getting the title back and a couple of times. First time, obviously, after Hogan had left. Actually, I take that back. He still had it before losing it to Otto Bonds. But what was the AWA going to do with it? They could have maybe brought in somebody else, but you also had lurking in the shadows. You had what is today a monster. You had this company, as we used to call it, New York. That monster was laying in the weeds and waiting, and they pounced and they took advantage of it.
So you were talking about the Saito angle with the bashing the trophy, and then that with the not giving the title at Super Sunday and issues with the money in Japan. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of things that are happening in a very short period of time that lead to him leaving the AWA and going to New York, and immediately, Bob Backlund goes to the back, brings out Hulk Hogan, and that leads into the match with Iron Sheik. But I want to, how much as Hogan's time in the AWA was winding down, how much of it just came down to the fact that maybe Vern didn't trust Hulk Hogan to be the guy?
I looking back on it, I don't think Vern was farsighted enough to think that far in advance. I think Vern looked at
and I'm not saying Hogan's bad. I'm not saying that, but it's like Vern. What I get from all the shows that we've done is Vern only put the title on people that he thought he could really trust, that were, part of his inner circle that he knew would do right for the AWA.
I don't think Vern necessarily took Vince's threat seriously at that point. I think that has a lot to do with it. He knew that there were rumblings and Vince was doing well in his little corner of the world. But sir, it's not only Vern, nobody expected what was going to happen. Nobody was expected that all the promotions were going to go down like dominoes once Vince got rolling. So I don't know if Vern thought, I can trust this guy, I can't trust this guy. I think it was more a fact that Vern was living in his own little world. You mentioned the financial situation with Japan. That played a big part in Hogan's leaving.
And that was something we didn't know at the time. And so,
Right.
I mean, naturally, you look at it on the surface, you're like, he didn't get the title. Of course he's going to be pissed off and he's going to leave because he's going to go someplace to get more money and be the guy.
Yeah, that Japanese deal, that was huge. And this is a situation, it's not the first time. A guy is a superstar, whether or not Vern and Greg and Bobby Heenan or whoever made the guy a star. Here's the fact. He is putting asses in every seat in the building. This guy is your cash cow. And, when Vern starts sticking his nose in business deals and he has that you need me, I don't need you attitude.
Did Vern have a right to do that, or did Vern overstep his bounds?
I don't think he's overstepping his bounds. I just think he just wasn't smart enough. I don't think that Vern at that point was looking at the big picture. I don't think Vern ever envisioned a time when the AWA, especially in Minneapolis, St. Paul, was going to go under. I figured, or maybe Vern figured, yeah, let them come in, let them do all this hoopla and everything else, but we're the AWA, damn it, we're the hometown promotion, and we're going to stay here. Very short-sighted, but again, Vern wasn't alone in that philosophy. All the other promoters, from the Eddie Grahams to the Sam Muchnicks, they all felt that this was going to be a passing thing and that wrestling fans, old school fans, were going to continue to support wrestling and they were going to buy into the Hollywood entertainment. Chris, you said something about so much happening so fast. We really don't know how fast this was all playing out.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great shot of Hogan and Nick. We don't know how long this back and forth has been going on behind the scenes. Then you start to hear little trickles of it, in the early days of the dirt sheets or whatever, that there's this financial battle going on with Vern and Hogan. But I think at that point, if you're Vince McMahon and you've got this vision, you're already looking at the landscape. You're already looking at the players on the field. And, back in 1983 or maybe even 1982, when Vince took over, I think he already had that vision. So this may have been in the cards for a long, long time. And Vern's lapses, I think, just sped the whole process along. That's my take.
I'll disagree with you on one point. First of all, you're right, Mick, about Vern's lack of foresightedness, at least in terms of, maybe a year or a couple of years down the road. But when Vern tried to, or demanded that he get a percentage of Hogan's Japan money,
Yep.
I think he was out of bounds because of the way that the business was at the time. They were independent contractors. Now, if it was Vern who called Japan and said, hey, if you want Hogan, then you can have him. I'll loan you from, I won't book him here in the AWA, but I need to get some money because if he's not here main eventing my cards, I'm going to lose money. So if Japan then would have agreed to it under those terms, that situation, I mean, that's more of a business deal where Vern's acting as like an agent. But the way that Vern did it is he just demanded the money, and in Vern's error, I made you a star, you owe me. A wrong approach. I think if Vern would have approached it in a different way, things might have been different, but not for very long. And we've talked about this on previous episodes. It did not matter whether or not Hulk Hogan got the strap at Super Sunday. The only thing that would have done was given Hogan more leverage to negotiate that initial deal to come back to the WWF. If anything, it could have been a Stan Hansen or Jerry Lawler or Medusa Michelli type of situation where they take and destroy the belt. And you know, can you imagine in 1984 Hogan's first appearance and he comes out with the AWA belt and then putting that in a trash can or running it over with a car or a sledgehammer? That's the only thing that would have been done if Hogan would have gotten the strap. The houses were not going to change. In fact, now granted, it was August, and we've also talked May, June, later half of May, from fishing opener until Labor Day, it was the off season or more of an off season for the AWA. So we didn't really get a true sense of the houses. I'm just giving it the benefit of the doubt. They were still good. Hogan was still getting the pop, but it wasn't what it was like at Super Sunday. And we will never know if that angle would have run out. If that would have played out until the month before Hulk Hogan leaving, maybe it would have been different, but that didn't happen. And so we will never know.
Chris, I wanted, to your point of, you used the term out of bounds. Was Vern out of bounds? And I guess when I heard that, I thought, okay, was he doing something illicit? Was he doing something, you know, that wasn't really, from a legal standpoint, was he not within his rights? Sure, he was. So in that sense, he wasn't out of bounds. And Vern was a typical wrestling promoter. I won't say typical. He was a wrestling promoter times 100 when it came to, we made you, you know, this is, you know, your glory is all because of me.
Didn't he do the same 10% thing to Flair?
Sure he did. But, you know, that was a little bit different because Vern had, you know, this is going back 20 years prior to that, or 15 years prior to that. You know, and Vern had this agreement with the wrestlers at training camp. That was a little bit different. They knew going in, I'm taking 10% of your income for whatever. Some of the wrestlers eventually rebuild. And I don't know if it was a legal binding contract for that 10% back in the day, or if it was just an unspoken, you know, you're going to give me 10%. So some of the wrestlers rebelled against Vern. But you know, it wasn't atypical for a promoter to say, hey, you know what? Oh, no, you're not doing that. I'm going to get a cut of the action because I made you. Fast forward to Joe's point, look at Stan Hansen. The same exact situation, Stan Hansen in Japan. And I think people lose sight of the fact of how important Japan is in the scheme of things, and it was back then. You know, Hansen and Hogan too were massively over in Japan. They had huge financial deals in Japan that really they could have lived off of that for the rest of their lives. So, you know, you start fucking around with that, and then, you know, hey, wait a minute. And if Vince gets wind of this somehow, now the wheels are in motion. Now, when we do our expansion, this is the guy we're going to get. Look at the houses. This guy, this specific guy, is drawing around the horn. And now Vern Gagne, that old fart, is making waves with this guy on his Japan deal. Boy, he is ripe for the picking.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if maybe, you know, Vince would look at that, and this is all hypothetical, saying, okay, well, yeah, he's drawing these houses, and maybe Vern is he's you know, he's poking the bear, he's poking the golden goose. I want to get into something that you said, Joe, and I think it was the Saito, where, you know, after that Hogan came out waving the flag and doing the you know, the American thing. I'm wondering if that inadvertently really helped light the fire for the Hulkamania that we know in WWE. because you already had this American who had this, he was building this persona, and then the big match was over a foreigner in the Iron Sheik who took the belt from Backlund. If the American would have taken it from another American, I don't know. So maybe the Saito and Hogan's like, you know what? I'm going to come out and I'm going to be an American. And Vince is like, I got the Sheik, the worst heel in the world, against this guy. Thank you, Vern. We're going to take this and we're going to take it 500-fold.
Brilliant on Vince McMahon's part. And
I mean, maybe that's not what happened, but
no,
I'm connecting the dots after what Joe said and kind of listening to you guys talk.
Chris, it makes perfect sense. Makes absolutely perfect sense. Yeah, I think Vern probably set the table with the Saito thing, and all of a sudden Hulk Hogan is becoming this all-American big, strong guy from Muscle Beach or wherever.
Venice Beach,
but I meant hypothetically.
Okay.
And then the Iron Sheik, as you said, the most hated villain in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about Iran and Iraq and everything else. My God, coming off of, the Iranian hostage crisis a few years earlier and everything else, the table was set. Yeah, Vern probably did set the table, but in so many ways, there were so many things going on at that time that either Vern didn't see, didn't notice, or didn't take seriously. And, put it all together, the financial stuff with Japan, the fact that Hogan's built up as the all-American hero, you got the number one baby or heel in the world and the Iron Sheik, magic. That's it.
And add the ingredient of Thunder Lips into that. Hogan literally had all of the cards to play.
Everything.
Vern called his bluff and lost.
Yep.
So Hogan won that title back in 84. And we know that, let's fast forward a year to March of 85. You've got Hulk Hogan and Mr. T with Jimmy Snuka against Roddy Piper, Paul Orndorff with Cowboy Bob Orton. WrestleMania 1, it was a big gamble. But not only was it, and I know I want to get more into the, going mainstream. I feel like when you've got Cyndi Lauper and Liberace and Muhammad Ali, this was kind of trying to intermingle the pop culture. And with Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albano, really, I think that was the beginning of the rock and wrestling connection. Absolutely. Because that's the first time that I think, because girls just want to have fun. Oh, who was her dad? Captain Lou Albano. So I think that WrestleMania 1, that spring of 85, that was another. I mean, you had 84 with the title, then you had 85, the rock and wrestling. I feel like you already had a rocket ship and you're giving it more juice and you're lighting an even bigger fire underneath it.
I think rock and wrestling did it. I mean, you can have a champion who's drawn big houses.
And you say rock and wrestling, then who are the names that you think of?
Yeah, and it's the overall vision, I think, that Vince had at the time. He takes it. He knew that the culture was changing. He knew that his audience was changing.
To a younger, hipper MTV generation.
There you go. And he took advantage of it full throttle. I think arguably, again, Hogan wins the championship in 84. He comes in like a house of fire and he was over huge. Yes, but it's still professional wrestling in its own little world. Now, all of a sudden, 1985, you've got this rock and wrestling connection. You've got news media covering everything you're doing. You've got MTV, which is massive at the time. You have all the cards are right there. And you mentioned the gamble that WrestleMania was. I've heard more than once, if this would have flopped, this would have farted, that would have been it for Vince. And it would have been the old Capital Wrestling territory in the Northeast United States, at least to some extent. He rolled the dice, love him or hate him, and it panned out. And Vince is a bulldog. He's tenacious. You know, everybody knows that. He had a, take no prisoners attitude, with his, remember those old videos, stand back. I mean, that was Vince's song. He wasn't taking
well,
any
probably a
shit from
reason. Yeah,
anybody.
probably a reason why that was his song.
Yeah, and he didn't care. He was the dinosaur. He was trampling over all the vegetation. And I think that rock and wrestling is what really put WWF on the map. Even after the Hogan title change, I think that was the single biggest change.
WrestleMania 1 transformed professional wrestling.
Yep.
Hogan winning the belt off of Iron Sheik was merely an appetizer.
Yeah.
The main course, and where wrestling first made, not even arguably, in my opinion, the single biggest change that it ever had. It was bigger than when professional wrestling left the circus sideshow and went into arenas / television. That elevated it, catapulted a little bit, but certainly again, in my opinion, did not have the impact that WrestleMania 1 did. Now, I don't want to gloss over, it was because of Hulk Hogan and his connection to it that helped get it over. Mick, you had talked about the national media. They were on, the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
They all of a sudden, professional wrestling was mainstream. Before then, and this is not, I'm just going to say, Mick, it's not a shot. Before then, it was just the true marks, the ones that followed it. It was sort of almost like a cult following to a degree of professional wrestling until WrestleMania 1, or at least even the lead up to it, because of this exposure. And I think the argument could be made that it even started when Thunder Lips was on Rocky 3. That was the first appetizer. And then the second appetizer, or no, actually I take that back. No, it was. Thunder Lips was the first appetizer. Yeah. The second appetizer was Beaten Iron Sheik. And then we go into the main course with all of the cocktails involved afterwards at WrestleMania 1.
Well, go ahead, Mick, and then I want to kind of...
I was just going to say, I think we're losing sight of one thing here. We've talked about how Vince was going to do this with, had it not been Hogan, it would have been somebody else. He had that vision. But like him or not, there has never been, nor will there ever be, another Hulk Hogan. Mm-hmm. This guy was absolutely the guy. If you're going to do this, if you're going to expand wrestling in the cable television era, if you're going to go across all these genres and entertainment and music and everything else, then you get this big, good-looking guy who's already made a splash in Rocky 3, bronze, tan, well-built, young guy from Tampa, Florida. This is our guy. This is our golden goose. So in that sense, yeah, they probably would have succeeded without Hulk Hogan, but never to the extent that they did. That's my feeling on it.
The impact that Hulk Hogan had, to relate it to the music world, he had the same impact on professional wrestling as Elvis Presley had on rock and roll, and then even the Beatles when they came over in '64. That's how big of an impact Hulk Hogan had on professional wrestling. He helped transform it. He didn't do it by himself. I'm going to give the credit to Vince McMahon for his vision, his money, putting everything out there. But it was because of Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon's vision that became the new Elvis Presley Beatles.
Normally we try and keep this thing about an hour, everyone. But this one is going to go well over an hour. I don't know if it's going to go an hour. I don't know how long this thing's going to go, but I want to make sure that we give it its just due. So if you're worried if we're going to kind of, we're going to hot shot some things, we're not. We're still going to try and lay everything out the best that we can. So it may be an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there kind of on the fly. You know, one thing about that, guys, and now we're going to get into kind of when I was a kid, because we're hitting some of these chronologically. We're now hitting that point where Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon are this team, and nobody knew that it was Vince. All we see is Hogan. I think the fact that, and I'm going to combine our next two talking points, and I think it'll make sense. I think the fact that he did one thing that nobody else did, he marketed this guy to kids. It helped them grow into that worldwide empire, because guess what? You had the action figures, you had the cartoons, you had the videos. He was a larger than life superhero, and he was the role model. And when you've got this big wrestler that can be, you know, this idol to everybody, it's so easy to entice kids to be like, this is your new hero, Hulk Hogan. And I think that they built off of that. And to me, that's where it's like really being a younger Hulkamaniac. When I was a kid, I'm like, that's my guy, because they painted it to me as a 12 and 13-year-old.
Chris, if you read some of the comments on the internet, not only from wrestlers, but from people in general, that's the sentiment that you get. Hulk Hogan was our superhero. You know, people that were born in the 70s and now they're in their teen years when Hogan is making his big splash. Everybody says, you know, this is the guy. The wrestlers will
as
say.
As a Gen Xer, Hulk Hogan was ours. As a Gen Xer, we got Hulk Hogan when he was the biggest thing maybe in the world.
There's no doubt about it. And, you know, I keep alluding to the fact that everything fell into place at the time. It was kind of like if you watch a Superman movie from the 1950s, and then you know, the old black and white where George Reeves is diving out a window onto a mattress, and then all of a sudden you're going to the Superman, you know, with Christopher Reeve with all the special effects and everything. That's what happened to wrestling, and Hulk Hogan happened to be the guy. And I think what happened as far as the kids are concerned, I think that once the juggernaut got rolling, and Vince was seeing the reaction, you know, maybe from merchandise sales or whatever, and he realized, holy shit, this guy is going to take us to the stratosphere. Now all of a sudden we're going to, you know, we're not necessarily interested in that 18 to 49 demographic. We're certainly not interested in the old school fans anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give a shit about them. They're gone. They're passé.
Business is changing. The demographics are changing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? God, now we can start a cartoon show. Now we can market action figures.
Yep.
It had nothing to do with wrestling anymore. Professional wrestling was a thing of the past in Vince McMahon's eyes. Fast forward to when he wanted to call it World Wrestling Entertainment. He didn't care. There was no legacy of professional wrestling to Vince McMahon anymore. Like it or not, it was brilliant, distasteful to us old school guys, but a brilliant marketing strategy. And my God, can you imagine the dollars and cents that Hulk Hogan made in the merchandise field alone? I saw an interview with Hogan not that long ago, and he said there was like 70 action figures, 70 different action figures of Hulk Hogan on the market. I mean, let alone the bandanas and the wristbands and everything else. I mean, this guy this guy may be one of the single most important people in entertainment pop culture history. No doubt.
Yeah. And let me say this, when you're talking about merchandising and whatnot, I remember watching a Hulk Hogan Mr. Perfect match at the St. Paul Civic Center in 1990.
There you go.
I still have the bandana. I was 15 at the time with the old WWF logo. I still have it, because this was my childhood. I mean, you know, for better, for worse, I really didn't start to question Hulk Hogan as the good guy up until WrestleMania 6 with the Ultimate Warrior. And that was the first time that I was like, damn. But the picture that I just put up with Hogan ripping the shirt, that's the Hulk Hogan that I remember. That's the Hulk Hogan that for me as a kid is that nobody else could rip their shirt, but Hogan was just this strong, unbeatable force.
And that, according to Vern and Greg, should be credited to them, because Vern wanted Hogan to show off his physique, this whole massiveness. And so, as Vern tells me the story, he just told him, rip off that shirt. Let's show that. Now, Grant, he was going to end up taking it off anyway, but just taking off a shirt like everybody else doesn't give you that aura of ripping it off and having those eyes bulge and do everything.
Well, I can't do this. Like the shirt that I've got on right now, I can't do it.
But Chris, you got to keep something in mind. It's professional wrestling. Most people aren't going to crash through a table either. There's a little help involved. Hogan had the top, the seam here. That was cut.
Fake.
Oh, look at poor Chris now. His
world
childhood was just destroyed.
Yeah, well, good thing he's a grown child now instead of a young child.
Chris, I want to talk to your point about the Gen Xers and everything else. Yeah, Hogan was absolutely the superhero. And Vince, from a marketing standpoint, genius.
Because your kids are Gen Xers, right? Joe and Mick, like, are your kids Gen Xers?
Yeah, and here's what I was going to say about the Gen Xers. That's the flip side of guys like me. There was a real backlash against not only Hulk Hogan, but the WWF from the old school people. It was like, wait a minute, where are you taking this business? This is not wrestling. You're making a cartoon show out of this.
Yeah.
Which they really did. They made a larger than life cartoon show with all the characters, from Hillbilly Jim to Uncle Elmer to the Warrior to Hogan himself. But again, I think the credit, you got to give Hulk Hogan the credit. He took the ball. He was this green kid from Tampa when he got into the business. And boy, did he evolve. Now, whether or not he had all the help in the world from his trainers and his coaches and everything else, this guy had a freaking 30-year run as one of the major forces in pop culture.
Yes.
And he did that because he could, because he was Hulk Hogan. He had the goods.
He capitalized on it.
Yep.
Very smart.
The first comparison that pops to mind, I've never seen a second of it, but Kim Kardashian. Would she be the success that she is nowadays if that sex tape wasn't done and released? She catapulted it. She, for better or for worse, she took advantage of it. She took the ball and ran with it and is, now worth over $1 billion. Mm-hmm. Hogan did a similar thing. He capitalized on his success with Vince's help, of course, and ran with it. And unfortunately, it also, in some other instances, to the detriment of the boys or of the talent in the locker room.
Yeah.
And we'll get onto that topic shortly.
Yeah, well, let's get right to it here, because being Vince's guy, it comes with privileges. And when you're the golden goose, you're the it guy, you're working hand in hand with Vince McMahon. And you mentioned the rest of the boys, Joe. They were at a disadvantage because Hogan got perks that they didn't. Hogan got benefits that they didn't. And way back in the 80s, the Jesse and Hogan dynamic, the Jesse Ventura Hulk Hogan dynamic, it's great for TV, but I feel like this is very much rooted in real life animosity because of Hulk Hogan. I think one of the reasons he was successful, and I think we know it now, and this is not a controversial take, Hulk Hogan looked out for Hulk Hogan.
And to a degree, rightfully so. I'm a firm believer that you can watch out for yourself, but also have a conscience and look out for others and to help others. Hogan, during this time, did look out for himself, and it made him a multi-millionaire and an icon in professional wrestling, but to the detriment of the locker room. Hogan didn't care as much about, I won't say none of the other talent, but a lot of the other talent. It's like, they're just, they're jobbers, or they're just, opening match or mid-card guys. I don't need them. The people are here to see me. The reality is, would people have just paid the money to watch one match with Hulk Hogan? Would it have been as successful? No, it was a part of a package deal. And I'm guessing, I don't know this, I've never talked to Hulk Hogan, but he didn't care about if they weren't going to make him money directly, then he didn't have the time for him. At least that's what it appeared to be. And to that, he was the one that squashed Jesse. And when Jesse tried to unionize professional wrestlers, because again, all the way up to the time of WrestleMania 1, even up to WCW days and the Monday Night Wars, 99% of the talent were maybe given a guarantee. But give you an example. When JBL first started in the WWE, I think it was JBL that said this at the Hall of Fame, Mick, his annual guarantee was $1,500.
Was that a month or a week?
No, that was per year.
No, I think that's when he first got into the business. Joe,
I thought he had said that was when he first got to the WWE, because no indie promoter is going to give a talent $1,500 a month or a year guarantee. But regardless of that, and I might be slightly off, I'll apologize for that, but the reality is Hogan squashed. He went to Vince and said, hey, this is what Jesse is trying to do. That led to Jesse's ouster. And the guarantees might have been different, but a guarantee isn't a contract per se. It wasn't until WCW when Bischoff started giving contracts to the boys, huge contracts that blew the doors off of professional wrestling back then. But my point to all of that is Hogan wanted to make sure. I believe that Hogan didn't want the union thing to happen, because instead of this, Hogan up on top and the rest of the wrestlers here, doing a union would have centralized it more. Hogan was still going to make more money, and he deserved to, through merchandise and his popularity. But when you get into a union, now all of a sudden,
everybody's got protections.
Exactly. And that's what Hogan didn't believe in or care for or go for. And well, that led to Jesse's ouster, and that led to animosity a lot in the locker room because of that.
Let me jump in here, because I'm not the biggest Hulk Hogan fan in the world. I think unionizing is one thing, and I think taking care of the boys is another thing. I think when you're talking about unionizing, not only is it a dollars and cents issue, but maybe it's about health insurance. Maybe it's about taking care of a guy's family, whatever. Guaranteed contracts, or what happens if I'm on the shelf for a while. So I think in that sense, and Jim Brunzell had tried to do that too. Brunzy, he got into some shit with Vince McMahon because he tried to get the guys stirred up and go for a union. So that's one thing. But I think on the other side of the coin, and I say this just because of what I've seen and heard from the wrestlers recently since Hogan's passing, almost to a man, whether it's Ric Flair, Paul Orndorff, whoever it might be, they all said, yeah, Hulk looked out for himself, but we made a ton of money because Hulk Hogan was on the card. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you can lose sight of that. I think that, some of the guys, I think anybody that tells you, Hulk Hogan was in for himself and he squashed all of us and whatever, you made a shit ton of money, folks, working those pay-per-view events and everything. Maybe not the money that Hulk Hogan was making, in terms of, he's looked out for himself and everything. Everybody does. Everybody mm-hmm. looks out for themselves in any line of work. If your boss is going to pay you $2 million and the rest of the guys are getting $350,000, what are you going to say? No, you'd have to be foolish to do that.
And that's kind of the same thing that when we talked to Jim Brunzell and CCO a few days ago, it was actually Thursday night. He just talked about Hogan being a part of the card and how, what do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats.
There's no doubt about it, Chris. And, okay, would these same guys who were bitching about their payoffs, would they have drawn the same house had Hulk Hogan not been on top? No. That they might have made a nice living, but they wouldn't have made the money that Hulk made on top. And I'm not saying that Hulk Hogan might not have been a selfish guy. He might have looked out for himself. We don't know that. We hear the stories about it, and we've heard that about other people, other guys in the business that are on top, holding talent. And we've heard it about John Cena. We've heard it about The Rock, that these guys, once they're on top, they look out for just themselves. But I think in the scheme of things, what you hear over and over again is that the veteran guys say we would never have made the money that we did without Hulk Hogan being on the card, without Hulk Hogan being the pilot for this spaceship that we call pro wrestling. Would Eric Bischoff have been in a position in WCW to offer guys these multi ridiculously $1 million contracts or hundreds of thousands of dollars had the Monday Night Wars not started? No. And it's because of Hulk Hogan. It's because of what Hogan, maybe / Vince, brought to the table, brought to the wrestling business. Everybody benefited. Now, was Hogan selfish in a lot of ways? Probably. Did he look out for himself? Probably. But by the same token, if I'm working for a company where the CEO is making a shit ton of money and I'm never going to make what he makes, but by the same token, I'm making a lot more than I ever would in my life because of this CEO, you got to temper it both ways. So, and that's what I'm hearing over.
But you brought up a good point earlier where we talked about things like health insurance, where you take unmistakably that during that time with Hogan as the main event, everybody on the card made more money. That's not even disputable. But on a typical wrestling card, even the pay-per-views back then, let's say, maybe 20, 25 wrestlers would be involved in that card. How many wrestlers were committed to being with the WWF at the time that didn't wrestle on that card? They didn't make anything because they weren't booked on that card. So that's where a lot of the animosity pops in, to have that, that guaranteed minimum, whether you think it's right or not. That's what the whole union thing was about. If you got hurt back in those days, if you're a mid-carder and you got hurt, legitimately hurt in the ring and could not wrestle for 3 months, 6 months, you didn't get workman's comp, you didn't get disability. It would be, well, you're hurt. we can't book you. You know, here's $100 to be able to go to McDonald's for a week. They didn't have that level of comfort or that security blanket behind them.
Yeah,
Joe, I'm sorry, Chris, I would agree with that. And again, as it comes to the unionizing the business, I think that's something completely different from making money. I can understand the union. I can understand, where Vince would say, well, you work for me, and no, but wait a minute, you're an independent contractor. You can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, I agree with the union, and wrestlers should be protected and their families should be protected and so on and so forth. But again, I go back to, and you brought up a point. Well, all these guys that were not booked on a pay-per-view or whatever, WWE a lot of times was running 3 house shows a night. They had 150 guys under contract.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to piggyback off of Mick, is that kind of what Joe was saying. I heard the old, you got A towns, you got B towns, you got C towns. Hogan was on the A card, maybe Warrior was on the B card, and then you had, I don't know, like Beefcake and Jake. You know what I mean? It seemed like there was like and I'm just throwing that out there, but you had if you're on the Warrior or the Beefcake and Jake card, then you're not going to make that Hogan money.
Absolutely.
You're still making money, but you're not on that card. And that's where sometimes people are like, well, yeah, we never got Hogan because we were technically a B or a C town.
But they're making money. That's what I would say. Even if they're on that C card, a guy like Ed Leslie, Brutus Beefcake, or this guy made a pretty decent living with These guys were all superstar television stars. So even if you're on the C card, you're still packing a 7, 8, 10,000 seat arena someplace. You're still getting a nice chunk of change.
But it's not Hogan.
No, it's not Hogan. But what I'm saying to you is, I think a lot of this was because of Hogan, because of the impact of Hogan. Look at a guy like Kamala. There's an old story, Kamala worked against Hogan. Hogan got an extraordinary amount of money, and Kamala didn't get nearly what he should have. I agree with that. But by the same token, again, guys like whoever it was, the Jim Neidharts of the world, or the Hillbilly Jims of the world, would they have ever made the money? And they were getting television, and they were getting merchandise revenue and everything else. So Hogan may have been greedy. You feed your cash cow, but I don't think it can be lost in the scheme of things, the trickle-down effect. And I say that only what I've heard from the guys. And a lot of the mid-card guys will say, I would have never made the living that I did, even on the C card, that Hulk Hogan, without Hulk Hogan. I think it was a trickle-down effect.
Not disputing that whatsoever, but I'm just going to go back to that baseline. B didn't make as much as A, and C didn't make as much as B. But if you're hurt for 6 months, you weren't making shit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a union thing, Joe, again.
But to me, that all, it's not just one little piece of the puzzle.
I agree. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, that you figure that Hogan, because he stooged Jesse out, was kind of, in a sense, hurting the guys because that would quell the union. I get that part of it. Absolutely, I do.
All right, well, let's...
And by the way, one final thought. If it would have gotten unionized, I don't think Hogan would have made less money. I don't know that he would have made more money from it. It would have been taken off of the top, which was the WWF. The company would have needed to step up to transform what were independent contractors to employees at the time. But that was still a bit of old school mentality from a promoter standpoint, because that's the way it was always done.
Chris, I know you want to move on, but I want to add one point to this, and that's with WCW. If Ted Turner's back wasn't against the wall, and if Vince hadn't done what he did, would Ted Turner and Nitro have been able to pay a guy like Tom Zank $175,000 a year to stay home. That's the thing. So in that sense, I get it's that trickle down effect. A lot of guys in WCW didn't work a fucking day all year, and they collected $150,000, $200,000. And I think you got to go back to what the catalyst was. And again, I'm not denigrating the unions, Joe. I want you to understand that. I get the point about the unions, but you cannot lose sight of the fact that, and this show's about Hulk Hogan. It's not about the rest of the guys. You can't lose sight of the fact that win, lose, or draw, love him or hate him, Hulk Hogan made a lot of money for the guys besides himself.
No doubt. I'll bring up one thing with Ted Turner.
Yeah, and then we got to move on.
I get it. But the reason the reason he put in so much money to WCW, no doubt he saw the popularity of professional wrestling. I'm going to throw money at it, give Bischoff what he wants to get all of this talent. But you got to back up even to the 1970s when TBS, before cable even started, and it was still a regional channel. Professional wrestling is what made eyeballs tune into the TV to watch his channel, to watch the NWA back in those days. Ted Turner admits it. Even right up until right up to when he started throwing all of these millions of dollars to allow Bischoff to do it. And Eric talked about this at the Hall of Fame. When Turner sold to AOL Time Warner, they just didn't want professional wrestling. They didn't get it. They didn't like it. And so that was a big part of the end of WCW. So for Ted Turner, Ted was almost like a Vern Gagne type of promoter. This is the way it was. This is the way it is. I just have, hundreds of millions of dollars back then, or maybe $1 billion plus, who knows. He had the money that Vern didn't have to be able to throw to it. But enough about it. I mean,
let's get back to Hulk Hogan.
I want to kind of get past the union thing, guys. I want to get to the controversy in 1994 with the steroid scandal with Vince McMahon, because that was also another crossroads that Hulk Hogan was involved in. The United States government had Vince in their crosshairs for, steroid distribution and whatnot. And they pinned their hopes. The federal government pinned their conviction hopes on Hulk Hogan, even though he was not in WWF at the time. He was, I don't know if he was in WCW at the time. I think he was. Either that, he was filming Thunder in Paradise. Either way, he had no obligation to be loyal to Vince McMahon. I want to get into the impact of Hulk Hogan telling on, under oath that Vince McMahon did not force them to use steroids. And then ultimately the Dr. D. David Schultz coming out and saying, I injected Hogan. We injected Hogan multiple times. It was very commonplace. So why don't you guys go ahead and pick that up?
I think that kind of tarnished Hulk Hogan. You have this guy say your prayers, eat your vitamins and everything else, but he doesn't mention, stick the needle in your ass either. It's amazing that Vince got off the way he did with everything that was, going on back then, that he, basically got away unscathed and continued to do his thing.
Because if Vince is found guilty, that's another opportunity for him to lose WWF. Like there are two. We're talking about two potential times where WWF could go under, and Hulk Hogan could be a major part in both of them.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it was almost comical, Chris and Joe, because everybody knew. I mean, it was not. Everybody knew that steroids are running rampant. I mean, you could see a guy, from 1 week to the next, and all of a sudden this guy is twice the size that he was last Saturday, and he's got muscles upon muscles. I just think that then you started to see the tip of the iceberg a little bit with the bullshit side of Hulk Hogan. That's what I would say to that. I think, the shine was coming off a little bit then, because all of a sudden it's not this all-American clean cut, I don't do anything wrong kind of guy. Everybody knew it. Whether or not Vince walked away unscathed from the trial, it was no surprise. So
No, and I don't want to say everybody was doing it, but doing steroids in the 80s in professional wrestling, especially once Hogan burst onto the scene, going right up into the 90s, and I would even say even into the early 2000s. Steroids were as commonplace as taking a vitamin every day.
every major league sport, Joe.
That's why he said take your vitamins.
Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire, that
there you go.
chase. It was commonplace. Doesn't mean that it was right, but that's just what everybody did.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of surprised looking back retrospectively that whole 94 steroid scandal didn't change or out steroid use more in other sports, because it was done in football. We know that it was done in baseball. Basketball, you didn't need it as much. Hockey, I don't know, maybe it was, it went into hockey a little bit, but it kept going. Why? Because it was for the betterment of the business, in particular, these guys being bigger, stronger, faster, becoming the $6 million man, and that translating over into larger than life presence in the ring, larger than life characters, and what ended up being a larger than life paycheck.
Yeah, let's get into, if Hogan started to be off the juice a little bit, off the gas, because at the end of his WWF run, when you get into WrestleMania 9 and you get into the King of the Ring in 1993 with Yokozuna, you get into that, and then the ultimate, the forced exit of WWE and into WCW. It was a different type of Hulk Hogan. It was not this big, muscled up. I mean, he was still in really good shape, but he was a little leaner than what we had seen.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about it. I mean, well, his whole appearance changed. I mean, he all of a sudden looked like this dark character, like the NWO character that he portrayed. So clearly, maybe he wasn't drinking quite as much tomato juice and V8.
Speed.
Oh my God! Don't do that to the guy. Talk about a scandal. But there's no doubt about it. But again, let's talk about that a little bit, because Hulk Hogan, what a transition, and he pulled it off.
Yes.
This all-American guy that everybody loved and looked up to, and then you fast forward to a guy like John Cena. John Cena's heel turn today that nobody's buying.
Hold on. No. Don't jump ahead, because I want to get into that. Don't jump ahead on it. Don't jump ahead on that yet.
But as far as Hogan is, puberty. But as far as Hogan is concerned, back then he made that transition. So he didn't need the big size. He didn't need to be the muscular beach bum guy. Now he's in black and white, and he's got the multicolored beard, and he's a son of a bitch, and he's hating everybody.
Well, even before that, though, I want to go into the real American version of Hulk Hogan before we get to the NWO. Was the change in appearance maybe just trying to also separate himself from WWE, because he was this big muscular guy in WWE? WCW, different company, different Hogan, still an all-American babyface and the hero.
Man, I don't know. I don't even have a clue of an answer to that. What was behind, his, the lack of size, or deciding not to be this big, strong guy, because WCW still had guys like that. They had the Lex Lugers of the world. Mm-hmm. They had the big monster guys. They even brought in, Mr. Hellwig for a little bit, and that kind of farted.
Yeah.
But I think at that point, again, the steroid scandals in '94, and now you're fast forwarding to the end of the decade, and you got to be really, really careful in the business, especially if you're trying to compete on that national level. You got to kind of mind your P's and Q's a little bit. And I'm not saying the guys weren't on the juice. Of course, there were some guys that were on the juice, and the bosses would look the other way depending on who they were. If you were a mid-card guy and they found you with a needle in the ass, you were fired. If you were a top-notch guy, well, I didn't see that. But I think the whole business was changing, and Hogan kind of changed with. To your point, Chris, did he do it intentionally to get away from the image? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, and it's obvious that he was off the juice by the time he got to WCW. Factor in his age. This is 10, 12, 15 years after he became originally the Incredible Hulk Hogan. Yes, that was a copyright infringement. Add in that he just went through the whole steroids thing. Again, I don't know, but I think those two things certainly factored into the new look Hulk Hogan when he first got to WCW.
Guys, we don't know either. Was Hogan already feeling the effects back then? Was his body starting to deteriorate from all the steroid use? Your mid to late 1990s, we don't know what was going on. So did he have foresight like, shit, I got to stop this? Or was it more a business decision? We'll never know.
Let's go to Bash at the Beach 96, because I know, Mick, you were getting there. This, for my money, the best heel turn of all time. And it's not even close. This was a second run for Hulk Hogan that I don't think anybody thought he had in him when he turned and joined Scott Hall and Kevin Nash at the NWO, became Hollywood Hulk Hogan. People wondering, how could you take a babyface like Hulk Hogan, who was the most loved person maybe ever in the history of the wrestling business, and now all of a sudden he is the most hated person in the wrestling business. And I feel like the John Cena, nobody's buying it. There are certain heel turns that nobody bought. People bought Hogan because I think Hogan really threw himself into it. Even if he had questions about it, he threw himself into that turn, and it worked.
Brilliant. And you're right. Probably the best heel turn in the history of the business.
Yes.
At least with the most notoriety. There's no question about that. And I think, too, the wrestling fan, there he is in the old black and white, the NWO. Wrestling fans of today are they're so jaded, and they're so tuned into everything that goes on behind the scenes. So they're not buying 1 minute of John Cena's heel turn. They're just not. Back in the day, this was such a shock. This was such a not only a
I didn't see it coming. I thought that I was a smart wrestling fan. I did not see the Hogan turn coming. I did not.
Because there wasn't an internet by then yet either.
Well, there was to some extent.
It was in the very infancy stage.
Right.
Infancy. Right. I mean, back in 1995, I had a modem. It was 14.4 kps, kilobytes.
Hey, I was using my Mattel Intellivision.
Yeah, my
but
point, not only is internet access horrible, but people didn't really have websites, certainly not like today. It was all textual because it would take forever to download one JPEG photo back in those days.
No doubt about it. The whole world was changing. But to Chris's point about being the greatest heel turn in history, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I love this picture. I mean, that is just classic stuff. And it's interesting, the cultural change, Chris, that Hulk Hogan twice now.
Yes.
2 times. In the first time is this all-American, all-world, good-looking, Greek god of a guy, and all the merchandise that he sold. And he does it again with a complete change in character in the mid-1990s, part of the NWO, and their merchandise was flying off the shelves, and people are still saying "too sweet." And you got that guitar riff when you hear that NWO music.
The Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Hogan did it twice in his career, and he took it to the limit. He took a bite out of it, and my God, again, made a ton of money for the guys in the business and the guys that were working in it.
And let me say this about the Hogan, because you mentioned the big babyface run in WWF in the late 80s. I was a teenager. When the NWO came along, I was a college student. And guess what? They marketed Hulk Hogan to me twice.
That's right.
And I mean, it worked. Hulk Hogan as the babyface, as the hero, worked. Hulk Hogan, part of this just dastardly, but they were cool. Like the NWO was cool. As a college kid, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm a 23-year-old college kid. I'm out here, I'm, chasing girls, and I'm out here, with the Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan. Like that was those 2 times to be Hulk Hogan fans for me. It was cool to be a Hulk Hogan fan.
Chris, it was the whole business. The whole business. They got away from the cartoons. They got away from playing to the kids. Now they had this new demographic that they were playing for, and they marketed it very well. The Attitude Era certainly is not your cartoon era. And all of a sudden, Stone Cold Steve Austin, swearing and drinking beer and spitting on everybody is the cultural icon. So the whole world was changing. But,
Yes.
To your point about Hogan, he absolutely got into that character. There was no question. You believed Hulk Hogan. You believed that this guy.
Because he could back it up. I mean, he had the Hollywood resume. You're Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Well, you were on all these shows. You were a big movie star. Yeah, you're Hollywood. I can believe that. I can believe Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
And there was a story behind it, and they capitalized on the story behind it, almost to a fault. Whereas fast forward again, we're going to talk about Cena. They had a storyline that they dropped the next night. I mean, it stopped happening, and The Rock was never mentioned as part of John Cena's reason for turning ever again. And now the guy's going to turn babyface again. Give credit where credit is due, because this show is about the Hulk Hogan legacy in the business. And as you said, 2 incredible runs, first as a face, then as a heel.
There is no mistaking, and I just want to be clear from my perspective that I agree with you 100%, Mick. Hulk Hogan was the single biggest draw in professional wrestling.
Not even close, Joe.
There's more dollars today, but the dollar is worth this much today, and it's like saying that the 25th man on the Twins roster was better than Babe Ruth because he's making the baseball player today is making $565,000 a year, where Babe Ruth was only making $100,000 a year. You got to put it into perspective. Hulk Hogan deserves credit where it's due, and that is the character Hulk Hogan, the character Hollywood Hogan. Boom, and then everybody else. Plain and simple.
Hulk Hogan. Yeah, to me, Hulk Hogan, we've compared it to Michael Jordan. Hulk Hogan is the Michael Jordan of wrestling. And I say it that way because it was the mainstream appeal. It was the marketing. It was the merchandising. It was the notoriety. I mean, wrestling, the wrestling ability, maybe the original 5 Moves of Doom. But the fact is, Hulk Hogan was easy to market, and he bought into it, and it was a partnership that worked. And I agree, as much as the Attitude Era and whatnot, and right now, more money, everything, that's one thing. But I do think, are we all in agreement that Hulk Hogan is the biggest draw, biggest name in the history of professional wrestling?
Without question.
There's no question about it. I mean, you can talk about, your Bruno Sammartinos, the Ric Flairs. I suppose Flair would probably be the second most recognizable name in the history of the business. Recognizable. I'm not talking about impact. Because this is all these years later, and people are still wooing in an audience or when somebody delivers a chop. But there's no comparison. There's Hulk Hogan, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah, I'd put Andre above Ric Flair as far as recognizability.
Okay, yeah. Well, you can't miss the guy.
Yeah, well, exactly. However, you're right about Flair. I mean, he did it for a longer period of time, and you go to sporting events nowadays, and you still hear woos.
The woos, yeah. Yep. Okay, so we've talked about Hulk Hogan. Now this is where you have to separate Hulk Hogan from Terry Bollea, because with the advent of the internet, we start to hear things, we read things. Some of it's complete bullshit. Some of it is made up to slander and demean and, rake people through the mud. There are some things that do have merit. And I think, like we said at the beginning, you can't talk about Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea without looking at everything as a whole. And we need to separate the individual, because the character was larger than life. The human, let's get into that. He had the reality show Hogan Knows Best. I think that's one of the reasons why we are allowed to separate Hogan from Bollea, because during that show, he was Terry Bollea. It was Linda, it was Terry, it was Brooke, it was Nick. It was doing their things as a family outside of wrestling. One of the things that we have known, and things that have been caught on hot microphones, on cameras, is the overabundance at times of using the N-word. Now, when I talked to Jim Brunzell on Thursday night, he said that, during his time knowing Hogan, he didn't see that side of Hogan. He didn't, everything about Hogan. He never saw the racist side or the aggressive side like that. Not to say that it wasn't there, and maybe it was, later in certain frustrated areas, but between the car crash with Nick, and just the consternation with his daughter Brooke's boyfriend at the time, it's, for better or worse, Hulk Hogan is going to be known as, dabbling into the racism, fair or whatnot. I mean, it's, people are going to say, are going to look at that and say he was a racist because he used those terms.
I think a certain number of people are going to look at it that way, and maybe a huge number of people are going to look at it that way. We're not in the mind of Hulk Hogan. Everybody has said things over the years in private. Our biases, tend to surface a little bit if we're talking to family and friends and we don't have a microphone in front of us. I think from what Hulk Hogan has said, and it has been caught on, I think there was a degree of racism there. Maybe, Jim didn't see it. Maybe Hulk kept it from the guys in the locker room, but I don't think that you can take these candid moments of Hulk Hogan, especially when it comes to who his daughter was dating, and not believe that when he makes these comments, he's sincere about it, and a lot of guys, I believe it was Devon or somebody, D'Lo Brown, somebody was talking recently about Hogan. And Hogan would never talk that way, and I got along great with Hogan. It's the old,
I think that was Dev. I think that was Devon.
Devon. Okay, it's like the inverse of it. Oh yeah, some of my best friends are black. And I get along with this guy, just great. He's black, I'm white, we get along. But again, it's those private moments where you kind of start to see the person. And when it involves a guy's daughter and he's throwing the N-word around and he's making really disparaging comments about, if it's going to be a black guy, let it be an 8-foot-tall basketball player making $100 million a year. That's pretty nasty stuff. A lot of people refuse to look at that, and a lot of people downplay it because of the magic and the myth of Hulk Hogan. They can't separate the Terry Bollea from the Hulk Hogan. Joe?
I hold this up as a prop where I'm the full of Hogan. I was holding up my cell phone. Back in the 80s, into the 90s, the only people that had recording devices were reporters, and that was the old little mini micro cassette thing that they would hold out. These are everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is as common as your key fob nowadays, and hell, it's even more common than a wallet because you can do Apple Pay and shit like there. But that doesn't escape the fact that he said what he said. And looking at what he said and how he said it, I can't deny the fact that he had racist tendencies, or he was a racist to whatever degree it is, but he did. Look at somebody for their individually as their character versus, what their color or nationality might be. Hogan got caught. It wasn't the main or only reason, but that was an ingredient to what later happened between Brooke and Hogan, and that was they did not talk. They did not get along. From reports I've read that, Brooke was able to talk to Hogan before he died and, said, "I love you." But make no mistake that it's very well known that the relationship between Brooke Hogan and her father and her mother has been strained for a very, very long time. And the racism part played a big part in that. You can't deny that. You just can't. That was Terry Bollea, not Hulk Hogan. We've talked about his impact as his gimmick. The person Terry Bollea was he had racist
Tendencies.
He had flaws, and
we all do.
We all do, and was he? We're not saying this guy was a member of the KKK or a charter member of the Nazi Party. We're not suggesting that.
Yeah.
What we're saying is that there was a part of him that had just this worldview that a lot of people do, but you never hear it out in public. Joe, your point about the cell phones, I think back to of all things, the O.J. Simpson trial. Mark Furman, who found the bloody glove. Had Furman not been caught on tape earlier on talking about the black people that he had arrested and denigrating them, had that not been made public, that little snippet of audio, things might have been different in the trial. Maybe. Hulk Hogan, Chris, you said something very interesting. You said Hogan's legacy, people are going to think of Hogan as a racist, and that's going to be, I said, a certain number of people will. A certain number of people who are more, I don't even know if woke is the word, more tolerant, whatever, are going to say, this son of a bitch was a racist. I don't care who he was. Then there's going to be a segment of the population that says, everybody says it. Nobody means it, and it's part of what we say.
It was a mistake. It wasn't who he was.
It was a mistake. He's apologized for it. Let's move on. And then there's that segment of population who say, yeah, so what? He said it. Well, the guy was right. So it's interesting. You're going to have a mixed legacy about Terry Bollea, and we knew that going into this podcast. You're seeing it all over the place. Depending on your relationship with Hogan, the way you viewed Hulk Hogan is going to be your final take.
The title of this episode says it: the complicated legacy of Hulk Hogan.
Couple more things, guys, to wrap it up. And again, I know that we were going long. I kind of figured that we'd go long.
Perfect. That's fine.
And I know we all have other things to do, but I know that this is, you can't put the career of Hulk Hogan and the life of Terry Bollea, I don't feel like you can rush through it. I think the lasting impression that people are going to have of Terry Bollea is, for better or for worse, his foray into politics. And we knew for years and years that he was friends with Donald Trump. Not a problem with that. You look at the business that Vince McMahon did with Donald Trump in the late 80s, having WrestleMania 4 and 5 at Trump Tower in Atlantic City, makes sense. You could probably get the building for pennies on the dollar, and I understand the lasting friendship and the relationship between those two. It doesn't mean you have to agree with Donald Trump politically. It doesn't mean I think Hogan and I think it was the appearance at the 2024 RNC. I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back for people that were not supporters of the MAGA movement. I think that was I get the impression like, you know what? I can't believe you do this. Fuck you, Hulk Hogan. Fuck you. You're dead to me. Other people were like, he's just out there supporting his friend. It's not a big deal. But I think this is going to, the last 18 months and being publicly supportive in politics, I think that's also going to complicate this much more than it ever would have been.
I think you had a trifecta here, Chris. I think going back to the racist comment. Okay, so he says that, that's a little flurry of controversy, more than a little flurry. Then you fast forward to the appearance at the RNC where he's attaching his coattails to a guy that has a history, of perhaps racism or whatever, however you feel about Donald Trump, the negativity there. So you got part two. And then the next time you see Hulk Hogan, he's in a predominantly blue Democratic city. And instead of coming out talking wrestling, this guy.
You're talking the Netflix.
Yeah.
The Raw on Netflix debut where he came out with the Real American Beer, to sell the beer in Los Angeles.
Jimmy Hart waving a flag behind him.
And he got booed out of the building.
That's the last
WWE appearance.
Yeah, that's the last people are going to remember Hulk Hogan is getting booed off the stage in Los Angeles and tearing his shirt at the RNC convention, and then backtrack a little bit to the racist comments, and then you backtrack a little bit to the steroid situation, and all of a sudden, like we said at the outset, you've got Hulk Hogan, the superhero character, and then you got this real life human being without the cameras on, without the lights on, whatever it is, flaws, warts, and all. And it is the complicated legacy of Hulk Hogan, no doubt about it. This is, my overall impression of Hulk Hogan, and maybe we can all, kind of say what we feel right now. I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with the racist things that he said. But as a professional wrestler, nobody had more impact in the business ever than Hulk Hogan. So you got diametrically opposing visions of this guy, and that's the way he goes out. Controversy creates cash. They're all of a sudden they had Hulk Hogan merchandise up on the internet the next morning. All of a sudden they had these T-shirts printed, "Rest in peace." What did they do?
Even WWE. To be fair, WWE came out with the Hulk Hogan Legacy edition of merchandise.
Isn't that something? It's just. But that's a whole other ballgame. Mm-hmm. Complicated legacy, controversial legacy, all of the above.
I can't really add anything more to that, Mick, other than you're spot on. There, and I said this earlier in this episode. Hulk Hogan is not Terry Bollea, and Terry Bollea is not Hulk Hogan. They're really two separate entities. In the end, it was all done by the same person. You can choose how you want to remember Hulk Hogan. I remember him as the Incredible Hulk Hogan. I remember him as the incredible, never before seen impact on the sport that we all love and we've been marks for our entire lives. But you also can't deny that, Terry Bollea, what his personal views are, and later to learn what his personal politics were. It literally is, you either love him or you hate him. There's no in between.
You can love Hulk Hogan, the character, and what he did for the business, while disagree with Terry Bollea, the individual, and the belief system that he had. Does this also, guys, is this also a warning to people to be careful to put people on pedestals, put your heroes, because they say never meet your heroes? Should we still do that? Or is this, because, I mean, part of people, Hulk Hogan was such a huge hero to a lot of people when they were younger. And I feel like over the last several years, I think that the Hulkamaniacs were built up, but I feel like Terry Bollea may have let them down. It wasn't Hulk Hogan who let them down. It was Terry Bollea who let the air out of that Hulkamania balloon. I mean, for better, for worse. Like I'm not, for me personally, it was very disheartening to see some of the things that he did later in life. But I think this is also just a clear, like, we've got the person, but we've also got the character. Do we need to be careful about the hero worship?
I think it depends on who you're talking to and who the hero is.
How much does a belief system play in that too? Because some people would say, yeah, Hulk Hogan's my guy. Terry Bollea is my guy. He might not be a guy for some, but it's like, I would put him up there because of what he done and what he stands for.
You got a guy who, President of the United States, who says, I could stand on the corner of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and they'd give me a standing ovation and probably a ticker tape parade. So in that sense, people are not separating their hero or whoever it might be, the guy that they idolize, from the true person. I think in Hogan's case, Chris, you're a Gen Xer and you remember your childhood. Mm-hmm. The childhood, the Hulkamania, excuse me, was 30 some years ago. And
or 40 years ago.
40 years ago. So now you fast forward to, the modern day, and that Hulk Hogan, the character was long gone. The Hulk Hogan character of the say your prayers, eat your vitamins, that guy was long gone. Now you got a guy who's involved in steroid scandals, who makes racist comments, who's hawking beer, and this is the way he goes out. So again, what can you say? Boy, you aptly titled this episode, Chris. It's a complicated legacy. And if you love Hogan, you love him, and nobody's going to change your mind. If you hate him, you hate him, and it's that simple. Either way, this guy made an impact that will last forever.
Chris, you had brought up about how you never want to meet your heroes. What had sort of popped into my mind, and I just had learned this recently. And this is not professional wrestling, and I'll keep it brief, but Megan Fox, okay, incredibly hot, incredibly beautiful actor. And then you come to learn that her husband bitches about her because she never flushes the toilet. And then she admits that she's a slob at home. I bring that up because what you see on screen, what you see of us on screen, although with us might be a little bit more genuine because we're not playing characters, we're just talking. Yeah. But even there, anybody watching us right now, you don't really know us. You might think that you do, but for 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes, maybe a total of 5 or 6 hours per month, you're able to watch us and see us. You might have an idea of who we are, but mainly you know us for professional wrestling doing this podcast. You will never, I shouldn't say never, very rarely do you ever get to really know what that real person is like, whether you're developing a friendship with them, whether you're dating them, whether you're married to them, whether you spend a week-long vacation with them. That's when you truly know somebody. My point to it all is, don't idolize what you see on your screens. Used to be just what you see on television and movies, but now it's on your phones, your iPads, your computer screens. Don't idolize them. You can appreciate the body of work that somebody does to present whatever it is they're presenting. You can like and appreciate that, but don't put them on any type of pedestal. You just can't. Now, Mick, I know, you and Nick had, you had a little bit of that idolization of Nick Bockwinkel. We both know what Nick was like in real life. Made it a lot easier to appreciate Nick Bockwinkel, the heel. But we understood what Nick Bockwinkel, the human being, was like. That turned out to be a very good thing. You and I developed not lifelong, but for many years, we had extremely close friendships with Nick Bockwinkel. That worked out for the best. But I would bet that 95 out of 100 times when you meet what you think is your idol, no, that's not reality. It's just not. Even if you met them for an autograph, you went up to them and they stopped and they gave you a hug, that should leave a good impression with you, that they stop and they take the time to acknowledge you, to take a photo, to take an autograph. You still don't know that person. You don't.
Joe, I think celebrities show people what they want them to see.
It's a publicly created image.
Yep.
Absolutely.
There's a PR team behind it.
Yep. Even us, you're seeing what we want you to see right now. We don't want you to see our personal lives or whatever's going to go on, after we turn the cameras off or whatever. We're showing you what and the flip side of that is you're seeing what you want to see. Your perception of us
That's
is
true.
what you want it to be.
Yes.
And that's what the relationship is. That's fine.
Great point.
When you lift the curtain a little bit and you see all the warts and all the flaws and all the the pimples and everything else that somebody has on their rear end, it's a different story. So for better or worse, Hulk Hogan, what an impression this guy made on the world.
Yeah.
Literally on the world.
You often hear about people ask who would be on your Mount Rushmore. In the total body of work in the business, Hulk Hogan has to be one of those four on there for the impact that he had. Say what you will about his in-ring skills. The mark that he left on this industry is incomparable, both as Hulk Hogan and as Hollywood Hogan. He made the single largest impact ever that the industry that we love and we've loved for so many years. He changed the face of this industry with Vince McMahon's help.